Here's just a little bit of an introduction to the portion, to the parsha. The Torah speaks about that a Kohen is referred to as Bnei Aaron, the women. A woman, although she's the daughter of a Kohen, she's permitted to contaminate to the dead. The wife of a Kohen, she's permitted to contaminate to the dead. But a person who's a legitimate Kohen, as we'll discuss, if a Kohen marries a woman who he's not permitted to, like a divorcee, although he's the son of a Kohen, he himself is not a Kohen. He's considered cholo. Cholo means he's been desecrated. So he doesn't assume the status of a Kohen, although he's the son of a Kohen. So it's interesting. You have a Kohen, he gets the Aliyah on Shabbos Kohen, and his son gets Shlishi. Because the mother was a divorcee, was a woman who the father was not permitted to marry as a Kohen. Therefore, he's not classified as a Kohen. Torah says he's not permitted to contaminate to the dead. The Kohen. Now, before the Chet Ha'egel at Sinai, who were considered the Kohanim? The Kohanim were considered the firstborn, known as the B'chorim. The B'chorim were meant to be the Kohanim. Because of the sin of the golden calf at Sinai, all Jews became tainted due to the idolatry. Therefore, the only tribe did not participate in the Chet Egel was Shevet Levi, the Levium. Therefore, only that tribe has relevance to officiate or have served to be associated with the service in the Mishkan or the Beis Hamikdash. The Kohen is the ultimate Levi. That's Kohen, that's Aaron and his children. And the other Levium are the officiants who assist the Kohanim in their service. That's the Levi. And the reason why they have no share in the land is because since they're dedicated to that role of being the officiants of Hashem, therefore they have no portion in the land. But to understand it at another, even a little more deeply, that all other tribes, because they were diminished due to the Chet Egel, they don't have no relevance. They're more mundane. They have a more mundane status. Being mundane, therefore, if you have a person of a more advanced status, more spiritual status, who should be the one to be involved in the material? The person has a greater relevance to the mundane. So all Jews who were tainted, diminished, compromised, their spirituality was compromised due to the Chet Egel, they receive a portion of land. Even though the land is the holy land, nevertheless, they're still engaging in the material. The Kohanim Leviim, because they're qualified, and they themselves are another level, they should not be involved in the mundane. What do? They're involved in the service of the Mishkan, the Beis Hamikdash, and also, when Moshe gives the bracha to Levi, he says, Yoru Mishtech Yaakov. They are the disseminators of Torah to Klal Yisrael, the Leviim, the Shevet Levi. So what is that? This is purely dedicated to the ultimate level of spirituality, which is the dissemination of Torah. That's Shevet Levi. Now, before the Chet Egel, as I mentioned, only the Bechor was qualified to do the service, to be the Kohen. Due to the Chet Egel, all the firstborn became disqualified because they became tainted with idolatry. Now, why was the firstborn the most qualified, naturally the most qualified to be the Kohen? What's the reason? Now, we speak many times, and we've spoken many times, that a Jew has an obligation to assume the characteristics of Hashem. Torah says, V'olachta b'drochav. You should walk in his ways. How do you walk in the ways of God? So the Gemara tells us, Mahu rachum avtah tei rachum. As he's merciful, you should be merciful. As he's chanun, he's gracious, you should be that. I mean, to our best ability, we should assume his profile. We had last week's reading, Kadoshim tiyu, ki kodesh ani Hashem Elokeichem. You should wean yourself from material, from physicality. Why? Because if we have a relationship to establish that commonality, as we discussed, to be the most compatible, We have to reflect Hashem's characteristics and to create that commonality for the sake of that relationship. That's the concept. Now, we say HaKadosh Baruch Hu Rishon Hu Achron. Who is the beginning, who's the end? Nothing preceded God, nothing follows God. God is the creator. So the whole concept of ex nihilo is God, bringing existence, but he preceded that. He preceded the ex nihilo. What is the B'chor? The B'chor is, as the Torah refers to him, as the Peter Rechem. That's the first child that opens the womb of the mother. So he has the characteristic of Rishon. He is the ultimate in Rishon. So because in his essence, he represents Rishon, he reflects the characteristic of Hashem, therefore every B'chor was naturally the one who was the most qualified to be the Kohen, to be closest to Hashem, because in his essence, he reflects that characteristic of Rishon. We have the law is that a kosher species, which is domesticated, Shor Kesef Eis, the ox, the goat, and the sheep, the first issue of their womb. Normally, for an animal to be a sacrifice, it has to be consecrated. A B'chor doesn't have to be consecrated. The firstborn of an ox, a sheep, or a goat has a natural consecrated status. Why? Because it's called Peter Rechem. Because it's the first issue of the womb of the animal, the species which qualify to be the karbanos, the sacrifices. Therefore, they don't need human consecration. They don't need verbal consecration. Naturally, just passing through the womb. But again, why? Because they reflect when anything you put on the Mizbeach is the ultimate, which has relevance to God. That's the sacrifice. There, as a result of that, it's the B'chor, the first issue of the womb of the animal, the species which qualify to be the Karban, then naturally consecrated without the consecration of the Jew. For the same idea, it's the same concept. But once we became tainted due to Chet Egel, as a result of that, the B'chor was no longer qualified, and that's the reason why the Kohen, the Levim, who did not participate in the Chet Egel, they were not tainted, and so the most qualified of that Shevet, of that tribe, was Aaron Ubanov. Therefore, they are the Kohanim. They are the actual ones who are closest to God. They do the service. The Levim assist them in their service. The Levim themselves, whatever their responsibilities are within the context of the Mishkan or the Beis Hamikdash. That's the concept. So now, what is the source of all death, Mark? What's the source of all death? When was death introduced to existence? In the Garden of Eden, the Gan Eden, there was no such thing as death. Initially, God said that the day that you eat of the tree of knowledge, you'll be subject to death. So death is an outgrowth of the evil that existed within the Eitz Hadas. The reason why a person has to die, we just had the Gemara in Shabbos, in Daf Yomi, that it says 4 people never sinned. There were 4 people in the history of the world never sinned. The first person who never sinned was Binyamin ben Yaakov. Binyamin, the son of Yaakov, never sinned. Never sinned. Amram, the father of Moshe Rabbeinu, never sinned. Yishai, the father of David, never sinned. And David had a son, his name was Kilov, never sinned. These 4 people never sinned, but yet they had to die. They died. Why did they die? Being a descendant of Adam Rishon, they were human beings. That evil that was ingested by Adam was intertwined and intermeshed in every human being's essence, even if one doesn't sin. For a person to live eternally, that means you have a relation with Hashem, body and soul, on the most intimate level. That Ra, that evil that was ingested by Adam, which is part of the makeup of the human being, cannot be part of eternity. Therefore, the person has to die, decompose, and is resurrected without that Ra, which initially was ingested by Adam Rishon. This is the concept. So now, the Kohen who represents, who's the one who's qualified to be closest to God, God says, I don't want him to be contaminated. He cannot contaminate to the dead under any circumstance. Cannot contaminate, except An ordinary Kohen, what we call a Kohen Hedget, could contaminate to his 7 closest relatives. To his father, mother, brother, sister, son, daughter, chas v'sholom, and his wife. Those are the 7 closest relatives. Anyone else, the Kohen, even the ordinary Kohen, cannot contaminate. Anybody but those. Again, because what is the representation of death? Death is, again, he's the one who's qualified to officiate. If the Jews wouldn't have sinned at Sinai with the Chet Egel, death wouldn't have had any relevance to the Jewish people. We reverted back to Kodim Achet. And therefore that's when we assume the status of Odom. Atem Kriyim Odom. We reached the most advanced level of purity. Sinai was at which day? It was on the 50th day after we left Sinai. 50, the Maral and Rabbi Nebachi speak, what is 50? The number 50 is the equivalent of 8. 7 is Teva. 7 is the natural order. The world was created in 7 days. 8 always supersedes the natural. That's supernatural. Therefore, when was the Torah given to Klal Yisrael? On the 50th. That's 7 times 7. It's the 8th. 50 is the 8th. That's the pinnacle of spirituality. You can't go beyond 50. When we reached 50, 50 had no relevance to the physical existence. That was supernatural. So we reached a level, we were extricated from that impurity of the Chet, of the Eitz Hadas. We no longer had that. Evil was vaporized from us. When we participated in the Chet Egel, that evil actually was reactivated within us. As a result of what? Of the Chet Egel. It touched us again. That idolatry, that whatever that idolatry was, it touched every Jew except Shevet Levi. But it touched all Klal Yisrael. And all Klal Yisrael are subject to death, including Moshe Rabbeinu was subject to death. As great as he was. Levi, although they didn't participate in Chet Egel, doesn't make a difference. But it's Klal Yisrael. The Odom, which is Klal Yisrael, now is tainted to a degree. Not to the same degree that Odom was after the 8 of Eitz Hadas. Therefore, why is Klal Yisrael called the Am HaNivcher? Why we are the chosen people? Why we the Goy Kodosh, the holy people? Because again, because we assumed the status of Odom, which initially was the intent of creation, which is the Tzelem Elokim, therefore, as a result of that, we ourselves have that special level of specialness. But again, ultimately, the most qualified, the most logical person to be the Kohen would have been who? Would have been the Bechor. But only so the Kohen, now assuming the position of the Bechor, being closest to God, and the Mishkan, as we'll discuss in a moment, was the location, which was, as the Ramban says, was the equivalent of Sinai. The Ramban shows that the Mishkan was a microcosm of Sinai. So the Mishkan itself, within the confines of the kroshim, of the vertical beams, was the equivalent, it was a replication of Sinai. Sinai, there was no chet. In the Mishkan itself is literally the equivalent of the terrestrial before the sin of Adam Arisha. Therefore, there, to officiate there in a contaminated status, even a Jew cannot bring a korban if he's contaminated with the dead. Cannot. But the Kohen, even outside the Mishkan, outside the base of Mikdash, is not permitted to contaminate himself, because he is the officiant of Hashem. And we'll discuss in a moment, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, is not even permitted to contaminate himself even to his closest relatives, his parents, his children, his siblings, his wife. Even that's not permitted, which we can discuss the difference why the Kohen Hedget, the ordinary Kohen, yes, and the Kohen Gadol not. This is the introduction to this parsha.